Hi, and welcome to North and Chick, a podcast about food, community, and well-being.
I'm Hayley North. I work as a holistic chef, food educator, yoga and movement teacher.
And I'm Kirsten Chick, nutritional therapist, writer, and author.
Together, we're passionate about nourishing our community with food, nutrition, movement, and in many other ways.
In our work and personal lives, we meet so many inspiring people doing incredible work for their community. So we have a wonderful lineup of guests for you. We'll be sharing our conversations alongside recipes, nutrition tips, and general life tips.
We'd love your feedback, so please get in touch via our social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as North and Chick. You can follow us there and also subscribe to our podcast to get an alert each time we release a new episode. Welcome to episode 6 in the North and Chick podcast series. We will be talking very soon to Barbara Wilkinson of the Herb Society. Barbara is a passionate advocate for bringing herbs back into mainstream use and keeping the ancient knowledge of herbs alive. Barbara is a third-generation herbalist, so this wisdom and knowledge has been passed down to her through her grandfather and her mother. And I'm always really excited to talk to people who have had this kind of experience throughout their childhood. As personally, I didn't have anything like this passed on to me when I was growing up. And so I'm gradually re-educating myself in these lost traditions later on in my life. Now herbs are becoming more and more a prominent feature every day for me, not just in the kitchen through culinary herbs, but becoming more confident to use them also medicinally and in homemade natural products, for instance, for body and home. But aside from their use, it's the reconnection to these plant beings that's the most important thing for me, and to learn from them and the gifts that they've got to share with us. So Kirsten, what kind of role do herbs play for you in your life, and how do you use them?
Well, I do cook a lot, so I grow my own herbs in the garden. I've got a sage plant, I've got some mint, I've got some rosemary. They're my basics. Oh, and some thyme. And then I have extras here and there like basil and so on. I'd like to really broaden that out, but I have a huge problem with slugs and snails that I'm struggling to get on top of right now. So I need to resolve that issue. But they're the basics that I use fresh. But I'm also a real massive fan of just getting a whole load of coriander or parsley or basil, dill, anything like that, chopping it up and just chucking a handful as a garnish on top of a dish. It adds flavour, it adds nutrients. It's an amazing source of vitamin C, especially through the winter months. So food is a really obvious place for me to be using herbs, but there's also herbal drinks, shampoos, and some of the cosmetics even that I use are herbal based. So herbs do seem to permeate my life. I would like to be more educated. Like you said, it's something that I didn't grow up with the background of kind of herb lore and my grandmother's teaching me what all of these herbs do. It's very much something that I've had to learn myself along the way. But I've always had a certain connection to herbs, in particular rosemary. We had a massive rosemary bush when I was growing up. I loved it. I don't know why I loved it. I just felt a real connection with it. I even called my favourite doll rosemary. And today it's by far my favourite herb. I cook with it a lot. I love the fact that I have a strong bush growing in my garden. I've been told it's my strength herb since as well. I even washed my hair with it this week. It was lovely and shiny. It was lovely and shiny afterwards. How about you? How are you working with herbs at the moment? You must use them a lot as a holistic chef.
Yeah, herbs are now in everything. I just love them. And in culinary use, I use a wide variety of herbs and spices in very much most of what I make and eat. I pick and dry herbs to make my own herbal infusions for drinking. I add them to DIY steam baths. I dry them and burn them instead of buying sage sticks or incense, for instance. I also use them in flavoured salt blends, in seasonings, in herb butters, in infused oils. So many ways now that it's hard to imagine that they were not always part of my life. And I'm always excited to learn more, and I want to continue this education in herbs so much. Particularly the food energetics perspective fascinates me as well, and this really inspires the work I do in the kitchen anyway. So looking at herbs in this way is really important to me. We can have a better idea of what herbs to choose and when, depending on what our bodies need, and looking at more how they work on a subtle, more vibrational level, instead of just choosing them because we like the smell or we like the taste. Many herbs are really powerful, and I want to be able to work with them consciously, not just to take them for granted or underestimate or their value or their potency and properties.
Do you know what? Whenever I fancy a herbal tea, if I'm going to have it from a tea bag, I'll go and sniff the bags that I've got in my cupboard. Or if I'm putting fresh herbs in, because often I'll do that instead. I'll just put a fresh herb in some hot water. I'll go and sniff the herb or see which one I'm drawn to, see which one, feels like the right one to have, rather than read the labels.
Yeah, exactly, because we may always gravitate towards a particular herb or a particular herb infusion if it's a tea, for instance, and it's just not right for us at that moment in our lives. It might not be agreeing with us on a deeper level. We might like the taste of it, but it could actually be hindering us rather than supporting us. So I really like this deeper understanding of herbs, this more embodied understanding. So to take some time to really get to know them instead of kind of jumping around, if you like, from herb to herb. So at the moment I'm spending a lot of time with sage and using that a lot. I use it a lot in cooking anyway, but also use that a lot in things like herbal steams, whether that's in the facial steam or in the bath. I use it in foot baths, and I also, like I said, use it in cooking a lot. It just feels right, and I generally just trust myself that if I'm drawn to something and don't analyze it very much.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I recommend it to people I'm working with for menopause nutrition quite a lot, specifically for hot flushes, actually. And some women it works brilliantly for, some women it just doesn't. And I'm not here to analyze why that may be, but like you say, maybe there's a reason why it's just not right for that individual at that time. So I don't kind of labor it. If it doesn't work, let's leave it, move on, try and find something else.
But herbal teas are an interesting one, isn't it? This is one of my favourite subjects and bugbears. So I'll try not to rant too much about herbal teas.
No, rant away.
No, I just find it such a fascinating phenomenon. It's only really relatively recently, isn't it, that our supermarket aisles and corner shop aisles are just now full of all these like super funky branded boxes of every kind of concoction and combination of herbs and spices that you can think of, all now in this rapidly expanding herbal tea business empire.
Yeah, it's really taken off. I admit I do have quite a few of them in my cupboard, but, some of them I genuinely really like. But also, as I mentioned, sometimes I just go and pick some leaves off a plant. In fact, often I'll just do that.
There's a couple of things with it, really. It fascinates me how we're drawn to the tastes of these tea bags. That's a great combination. I feel like a triple ginger now, or I feel like a detox tea, without really very much understanding of the individual herbs themselves, what properties they bring to us. Is that what our body actually needs? It feels like not really respecting the herbs for the power and the potency that they bring, that they're just like this tasty drink.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that. And when I'm asking people what they drink on a typical day, sometimes people will be drinking 8, 9, 10 cups of herbal tea just for the flavour without really considering what an impact that might be having. Yeah. And occasionally that might be appropriate, but you're right, a lot of the time that's just a bombardment, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, and I wonder how different it might be if we were more tuned in to the herbs and the properties and the characteristics and what our bodies need, how we might choose our herbal tea or our herbal infusion drinks differently.
Yeah, Totally.
The other aspect of it, of course, is that we don't really know what's inside the herbal tea bags. Okay, it says what it is on the box, but how old are they? What kind of conditions have they been kept in? What journey have these herbs been on? Who's been handling them? How have they been processed?
What plastic is in the tea bags?
Exactly. So that's a huge thing now, isn't it?
And it's really interesting. You know, a couple of the brands that I've been buying for a long time, because I do really trust their quality, have declared themselves to be plastic free, which is really nice and reassuring. But back to what you were saying originally, it is a big business now. And if I add up all the money I've spent on all the herbal teas in my cupboard and compare that to how much I could spend just on seeds or seedlings and grow my own, it's a bit shocking, really.
Yeah. Even Sarah Fernie in our last episode, she was talking about, you know, growing your own herbs. You know, everyone can do that, even if you're on the top floor of a block of flats. You know, you can put some herbs on the windowsill or on your kitchen counter or on your terrace if you have one. And we don't need to have a huge garden and an allotment to do that. So that's one way that we could save some money and increase the connection to these herbs and maybe develop a closer relationship with them.
Absolutely. And I bet in a block of flats you're not going to have the problem with slugs that I have. Yeah. So that's one thing that I'm thinking, having this conversation, that I need to try next actually, is to abandon trying to grow them in my garden and maybe get a window box.
Yeah. And then you can make your own ones. You could go and pick some fresh mint leaves from the garden. I mean, I have been in some high street coffee shops, and not being a coffee drinker, I generally gravitate towards the tea selection, and the fresh mint leaves in hot water has become quite a thing. But there are some places charging a couple of quid for those free mint leaves in a cup of hot water.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But it costs nothing. I was around at a friend's the other day, and it was the afternoon. I really didn't want any caffeine at all. And she put the kettle on and looked at me and said, I don't have any non-caffeine drinks available at the moment. So I just asked her to give me a cup of hot water. I noticed she had loads of basil growing on her windowsill. So I just plucked a few leaves of basil, put them in the water. It was utterly delicious. Didn't cost her a penny. Was a really good solution for me. Okay, so let's go over to Barbara Wilkinson now. Following a lifelong passion for health and nutrition, Barbara qualified as a Consultant Medical Herbalist in 2012. She's a member of the College of Medicine and Integrated Health and runs the Springfield Clinic of Natural Healing in Cheshire. Barbara is an advocate of cultivating the use of plants in everyday life and keen to empower people with the confidence to embrace food as a medicine. As well as running her own practice, Barbara is a trustee for the Herb Society and has appeared as a guest speaker at numerous events and conferences. She has an allotment where she grows produce that is used for medicines within the practice, and has worked with the Herb Society on designing gardens for the RHS Flower Show, Tatton Park. In 2018, she appeared in the BBC's coverage of the RHS Flower Show as part of a special segment looking at fermented foods. She recently supported Alys Fowler in producing her new book, A Modern Herbal.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Absolute pleasure. We're just so overjoyed you could join us. So tell us more. You're a medical herbalist. How long have you been involved with herbs?
Well, in truth, all my life. As a little girl, I was always out and about in nature and absolutely loved, like most little girls do, to collect flowers and to take them home for mum, or actually anybody who wanted them in the neighbourhood. Being brought up in a corner shop in quite a built-up area, some people never really saw much of nature, so I was keen to share the love as such and take flowers home and all sorts of things. And of course, having an inquiring mind, I wanted to know the names. So I soon got to learn about the seasons through doing that sort of thing. So really, coltsfoot was one of the things at the beginning of the year that I used to collect. The very early yellow flower would sort of shout out at you and long to be picked, very daisy looking, so very attractive. And so really, I've been doing it all my life. And because you ask, you learn, you find things out. And of course, Mum was a herbalist, but not qualified. My grandfather was. So it's a bit like being a third generation herbalist, really, although I've trained professionally. But I was brought up with herbs. So herbs were not only in our very small yard, being brought up in a shop, but they were out in the wider aspects of nature. And of course, there was a lot around the house because that was our go-to when we weren't well. We were treated at home. We didn't really visit doctors. So it was a different way of life from what I discovered pretty quickly growing up from what the rest of my peers were doing. So, yeah, very, very different. So I've always been surrounded by herbs and had a home absolutely full of them. Nothing's changed. In fact, there's probably more now.
And you say you've gone from picking coltsfoot and other herbs as a small girl, and now you're a trustee of the Herb Society. So let's look at the charity a little bit first. Tell us more about the charity's history.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I was fascinated myself to find out and discover why. And it really started with quite a strong, influential lady called Hilda Lale, who was planning to be a doctor. And she started off on that path, but she met somebody and married, had a couple of children, and of course couldn't continue. And unfortunately, her husband died as well. So she was left bringing up 2 young boys. But she'd learned that, of course, all medicine came from plants. She loved the botany. She enjoyed learning and researching. And so she amassed quite a huge library, actually, and gained a lot of knowledge and skill. And of course, her life was such that she managed to mix with other people who were classed, I suppose, as herbalists, just herbalists in those days. And she went on to actually work in that field and to help others. And she did extremely well. And she even collaborated with the well-known lady known as Maud Grieve, who wrote The Modern Herbal, a book which is still on student reading list today, and actually many members of the public have it. It's an amazing book with a wealth of knowledge in it, and she edited it and she worked with Maud to help her get that into print. So Hilda was very well known, but she wasn't very happy when the government were bringing in an act of parliament that was basically banning the use of herbal medication to the general public. And anybody that was a herbalist wouldn't be able to continue. In fact, most of the herbs would have been taken off the shelves of the herb shops that were in existence in those days. So naturally, she lobbied the government. She went to them and she stated her case, and the act was amended that as long as the general public consulted a herbalist, then they could still be treated as such by the herbalist, which was, of course, was important, still have access to them. So she and a number of other people really worked hard to ensure that we still had choices in our healthcare. Because even then, a long time ago, it seems like now, but in actual fact, history does repeat itself. So there's a lot of things we can look at. Hilda was born in 1880 and she died in 1957. So that's the period of time that really we're talking about with her. She did a lot of wonderful things. She went on to open the culpepper shops. She used the name and created different shops in most cities, starting in London, Bath, Bristol. And she was the herbalist with the consulting rooms. She used to see people through her shops. And she helped during the First World War and again during the Second World War. So having got to know her and read her books, because she was an author, very interested in nutrition and cooking and education, as much as herbs and herbal medicine. And when you read her books, her character really shines through. And I kept thinking, and still do, I think I'd have liked Hilda. I think we'd have got on really rather well.
We used to have a culpepper here, actually. It was my first introduction to what herbs could really do. That's in Brighton.
Yes. Yeah, well, she was mainly in the south, you see, because she was sort of London area and rounded about. So, yeah, it was very important. And most people remember those days, of course. On her death, it changed and the culpepper shops went. And eventually the growth of pharmaceuticals and the chemists replaced all the health food shops as such and all the herbalists that often worked in the high streets and places. So that changed with time. But she even created the lottery. She called it the Golden Ballot. And she helped returning injured First World War soldiers to have somewhere to live. She created a village with a wealthy landowner up in Lancaster and also one down in the south, and it's still in existence today, actually. So she was very instrumental in generating income so that injured soldiers and their families would have a home to come back to and a life, building churches and schools and all sorts of other things, playing fields and everything. So really quite remarkable. So she was doing charity work even then, wasn't she?
She really was. But it wasn't a charity back then, was it? Didn't it become a charity when she died? What happened then?
Yeah, well, because of the Government Act, she created the Society of Herbalists, which is a bit confusing because actually it just meant that it was a members group. So if you wanted to be consulted by a herbalist, you had to be in her members group. That's how it worked. She didn't really charge people, though. She only charged them for the prescriptions. So it was on her death that things changed, and then it became the charity, and then it got its name of the Herb Society. And interestingly, Australia and America also have herb societies, and we have connections with them even today, and it's all thanks to Hilda.
Wow, she really sounds like quite a woman, quite a character, and I really thank you for bringing her into our awareness. I'm delighted to get to know about Hilda.
Yeah, she's a fascinating lady. I mean, there's been some amazing women through time, through history. Yeah. And I was fortunate to go to the village in Lancaster for the 100-year centenary, and they've got a plaque up on the side of some of the properties, some of the terrace houses, which aren't like terrace houses, red brick, like you would imagine in Coronation Street. They're really quite different. And the streets are lined with lime trees, and growing in the grass verges is yarrow and all the different herbs and medicinal trees that we are still using in herbal medicine. So I'm sure she even had a voice in, what trees to plant, because of course lime trees are for post-traumatic stress disorder, and even the fragrance helps. So it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. That the village is lined with those trees.
Yeah. Incredible. So what's the main focus of the charity now?
Well, the main focus is really a bit like in Hilda's day, that it was about education of herbs, in so much that they're there to be understood, recognised for their virtues, because they're used in so many different ways in our lives and always have been ever since humans have been on the planet. And when you get certain bodies that want to disregard them or ignore them, then she was one who wanted to ensure that the knowledge continued. And that's really what the charity is about, that the knowledge of herbs is still there and recognised and passed on, because our way of living has changed. And often now we don't live in communities and we don't share knowledge in the same way. It's a bit like cooking. We don't hand down skills often. So it's important to keep these skills and this knowledge alive. Many other countries around the world have done very, very strongly. Take China, for example, and they've put a lot of money behind herbs to prove that medicinally they do what they say that they do. So every culture around the world has maintained its connection, and Britain and America have been a little bit putting it on the back burner. And of course, it's very important that we understand the connection with nature and environment and the wider aspect of herbs. They're for everything, aren't they? They're for the animals, the insects, the pollinators, they're for the wildlife, they're for the human health, they're for food, medicine, they're for crafts, they're for mental health. They're literally everything we can think of. So it's very, very important that knowledge isn't lost. So the charity today is very mindful of the fact that we need to keep herbs in people's minds so that they understand our connection with them and the importance of them, that they are things that can be used just for in the garden, but also in the kitchen, also in the first aid cabinet, etc. And that, of course, we can make things with them in crafts as well, and we can use them for our animals and pets and everything. So it's very, very important that we have a community of people that are keeping the knowledge and the skills alive. And of course, people are really keen to learn about these things. People tend to think, about trends and fashion and new things coming in. And really, it's all been done before. There isn't really anything new. It's just that we've sort of got, as they always say, disconnected. It's got forgotten about. And so to show people how they can work with herbs in so many ways and get so much satisfaction and pleasure from them, and to help others with them, then it's a very rewarding job. And that's really what the Herb Society is about. It's about education and keeping herbs alive in every sense of the word. They were our past, they are our present, and they certainly will be our future, so that they're not to be sidelined.
I really resonate with something that you said recently in a conversation that we had about how interesting it is that all of this is labelled as the complementary, the alternative kind of medicine scene, alternative health. And it's like, no, it's the original health.
Absolutely. And I say it quite a lot. And I've always been very vocal. And I suppose it's because of my upbringing. I was brought up in community. It was very important. And that's continued with me all my life. So really, it's that connection and the way I was shown as a child and throughout life of working together and being in a community, and to ensure that people understand that terminology tries to change the way we think often. And, as far as herbs are concerned, humans have been using them ever since they've been here on the planet for literally everything. So you're quite right. They are the original medicine. And it's the complementary and alternative, which is the modern things that are still being tried and tested.
I so agree with that. And you've talked about all the different ways that herbs can be used, all the different contexts. Who's the Herb Society for? Who can become a member? Is it just herbalists, or do you open it up to other people?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Anybody. Back in Hilda's day, it used to be quite wealthy people that were in like the members group, I suppose. Now we'll have anybody. We'll literally take anyone, because that's what it's about. It's for everybody in every walk of life, no matter what your views, opinions, no matter what. It's a membership which is really building a community of people that are interested and that want to learn. Most people that join the Herb Society are there because, they believe in herbs and they want to learn more about them. And they might be just starting out with a balcony, or a pot of basil from the supermarket, and they just have that inquiring mind. And that's really what the Herb Society is about, to encourage that inquiring mind and to inspire and to promote and to encourage people to use and value herbs in every shape and form. So anybody, even we have members around the world, and they get digital copies of the magazine and the newsletter. And we've got many people. I can remember we've even got a number in Japan.
Oh, wow. So you don't have to be qualified or an expert. Anyone can join, anyone with an interest in using herbs in any way.
Yeah, it's for amateurs and professionals. So we hope that we strike the balance in meeting the needs of everybody. So there's everything there, and that's in everything that we do, whether it be the blog, the book reviews, the members magazine, the newsletters. And we're keen that members become volunteers to help as well. I mean, I know all charities and societies always say that, but really, charities and societies don't continue without support. And as we have no external funding, we are totally reliant on membership and people coming forward to help. And volunteers come and go. We all do our time and then things change. But frankly, the more the merrier, because so many people have so many skills and they can bring those along and they can contribute. They get so much from being in this kind of a community. It's very rewarding.
So what is actually your role in the society, and how did you get involved with it?
Well, I'll take the last bit first. I was a Herb Society member, so I knew about it. I'd been introduced to it by a herbalist friend of mine that I was working with and then became my mentor. And I started to look at some of the events that were being run locally and went along to some and very quickly got to know people. And then I was approached by the then council. They were rather nervous of the fact that potentially rules and regulations were coming in within herbal medicine and that perhaps they weren't quite up to date and they needed somebody to advise who was up to date and knew what was going on. And they wanted to be confident when they put information in magazines and different places that actually it was the right information. So they wanted to be able to have somebody to run things by as well. So that's how I got introduced to it, and I was only too welcome to get involved, actually. And then what was my role? Well, ideally at first it was that, but as you could probably tell, I do like to talk. And so I do like to communicate with people. And so I do quite a lot of events for the charity around the country. and I am a bit of a networker, I suppose, really. And then I started 4 years ago now to learn how to do social media to progress the charity into the modern age. And so really just to raise awareness that the society exists, because I very quickly learned when I came into the role as trustee that not only are you responsible for the purse strings, which weren't too good at the time, the pot of gold was being eaten into, so finance and recovery of the society was a big priority to ensure its future. Because when I was at events, I'd say to people, now, I presume you've heard about the Herb Society, the educational charity. All I get all the time was, no, I've never heard about it. So naturally, it's a way of promoting, and that's really a lot of what I do. I've been very fortunate working for the Herb Society that many doors have opened, actually, things that I would have never thought possible some years ago. But people approach you through all sorts of different ways. And the charity has always worked for with the RHS, I should say. They used to go to Chelsea Physic Garden and do the Chelsea show at one time. Then charities are no longer invited, sadly. But Tatton still goes on. And because I live quite nearby, I'm the obvious choice to get very much involved with it. Literally, all sorts of things happen. I am really the main person that does the events, but I do anything that I'm interested in, actually, and that I think will be of benefit to others, and especially the charity. So I give tours in physic gardens, like at Congleton, which is coming up in September. I go and work in community gardens, which I'll be doing this weekend with a colleague. So I do all sorts of things, really. Any opportunity to talk about my favourite subject, and that's herbs. And then I'm quite happy to be invited if I can make it.
So that sounds wonderful. It sounds like a really fun life to have alongside your practice, and to open it all up. So to have the education side and to have all of the talks and events that you do, and then have your own practice and your allotment and your relationship with herbs as well.
Definitely, because I'm not the sort of herbalist who wants to work full-time, flat out, back-to-back, Monday to Friday. No, certainly not. I'm a grower of herbs, and I like to teach, and I like to just have time with my plants, and I like to make my own medicines and all the things that go on in the background of being a medical herbalist, and continuing your research as well, continuing to learn to bring things to your practice. So attending things is equally important. But yes, what I never thought or imagined really, the Herb Society has brought additional things. So I value it highly because it's brought another arm to my life, if you like, and one I really enjoy. Very privileged, actually.
So let's bring it back to those herbs that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So you mentioned before that herbs have virtues. Can you describe a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yes, I can. And the reason I say it such a lot is because I knew Christopher Headley quite well, who was a wonderful master herbalist, really. And he was very good at talking to people and giving stories. And the stories were a great way of connecting with people, children and adults alike, to explain about herbs in every sense of the word. And I often heard him use this word about virtues, and it resonated with me right from the word go. Because most people, when they see a herb or read about one, or you're introducing them to a plant, the first thing they say is, well, what can I use it for? And I don't want to be difficult or awkward in any way at all, because I'm delighted that they're inquiring and that they're questioning and they're thinking about it. But really, herbs are for much more than just how we personally can use them. They have so many virtues, and that one herb that person might ask that question about, I could probably write a book on. So it's not a one-line answer that I can just give quickly. And that's why it's difficult with Instagram, because Insta is instant, isn't it? And it's brief, and you can't really go into detail, but it's to ensure that people have that inquiring mind, and that it opens up, it plants a seed. And the seed should grow and develop from that thought, from that idea. And that's how I see the social media. And it's to encourage people and to just hopefully inspire them, hopefully, pursue that inquiring mind. So herbs are never just for us. There's much more to them. There's lots and lots of virtues. So properties, medicinal, culinary, kitchen, potentially a craft. I've just cut goldenrod, for example, today, solid Ago. Just brought the heads home, brewed a pot of tea, sat and enjoyed it, sat with the leaves. And I'll use the tops and the leaves to make medicine, tinctures, to dry some, to encapsulate, to do for future teas. I'll put them in a jar, enjoy them just as the yellow flowers are. I'll leave some on the outdoor table to see all the pollinators still enjoying them. I'll leave lots still on my allotment so that they can still be enjoyed by nature. And everybody who walks past who comments on them. So it's mental and it's physical. It's not just one thing. And of course, I'll make things out of them as well. And later in the year, with the stems bare of the flower heads and bare of the leaves, I'll use them for craft, because those twiggy bits will make beautiful stars tied with string and used at Christmas. You know, sometimes we warm to certain plants. Why do we warm to them at certain times in our life? It's so important that we go with it, go with that flow, rather than think, oh, I'm not sure if I should be doing that. Great if you've got somebody to ask and speak to, or something that you can refer to, but just give it a go. Just be brave enough. That's what we did in the past. That's what our ancestors would have done. There would have always been the wise man, the wise woman, the shaman, somebody around in the village. And that's why the community comes in, isn't it? Have somebody you can ask.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So if somebody out there is like, I really want to get started with herbs, I really want to know more, what are Barbara's top tips for getting started?
Well, if you're in the UK, I would very much say we have to be aware of the seasons. We have like a summer life and a winter life and the bits in between, but it does vary. And with nature, it's about observation. We're all nature watchers. We have to be. Some will just see being a weather watcher. That is involved as well, naturally. But we have to observe our plants. And for starting out, observation is the key thing, really. And look at the detail. Sit with a plant. Sit alongside it. You're not only seeing, but you're smelling, you're touching. They offer so many things. And plants, when they're growing, when they're young, are often hard to recognise, especially if you're a novice, if you're just starting out. So watch it in all its stages. So many plants, even the leaf shape changes as it grows. The first early leaves look nothing like the more mature ones later on in the year. And to truly identify, you need to see the flowers as well, if it's a flowering plant or a flowering tree. So everything around us is a herb. The grass we walk on, right up to the top canopies in the trees, everything is a herb. So there's a lot to observe, a lot to watch. So it's a lifetime, isn't it?
I've also been really inspired by what you've been talking about, and the way you describe it as well really brings it to life. It's so colourful. You've mentioned a couple of times your Instagram, and anyone out there who's also on Instagram, do check it out. It's just glorious. So is it the Herb Society UK?
Yeah, it is. I've been absolutely amazed. Nobody's more surprised than me, because, 10 years ago, I never even had a mobile phone. So the things you have to harness and you have to do. And when Alys Fowler said, Barbara, get them on Instagram, that'll help promote the charity, I thought, well, there's only me that's going to have a go at that. So again, you look to your friends and family to teach you, to learn. Keeps your brain active. Certainly keeps me active.
It's a really lovely little insight and really educational as well. I'm very grateful to have come across that.
Glad you enjoy it. And I'm so pleased that so many people do put lovely comments on saying exactly that. And I'm always saying, I'm glad you like my rambles. I do feel often like I'm taking people with me on my walks, or sitting with a pot of tea with me or something. And it's nice. I get as much from it as others seem to get. So it's lovely. It's a mutual thing, really.
Brilliant. That's exactly how it comes across. So Hayley is a holistic chef, food educator. I'm a nutritional therapist. We're very food focused. So we always ask our guests to share with us a food memory. So Barbara, what's your food memory you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I've got lots really, but I always seem to go back to very happy memories of staying on a small holding, a farm on the Fylde coast when I was a child, because my parents worked hard 7 days a week till 10 every night in a corner shop. And they didn't really have the time to stand in the kitchen and teach skills and things of that sort. Mum certainly was rushed off her feet as my father was. I learned so many other things. But when I went to stay on this farm, they had an orchard. And of course, there was apples and plums and damsons, and there was hens and ducklings in the orchard. It wasn't big, but to me, it was absolutely beautiful. And they had the wider landscape around the farm as well. And so there was all sorts of activity going on in nature. And I loved the fact that the seasons, I was there predominantly in the summertime when things were school holidays, a bit like they are at the moment while we're recording this, that it was on that turn of autumn when things were coming in. So we'd be harvesting and we'd be making. And I learned how to do jams and chutneys and listen to the sound, things like that, little things that just tell you when something's ready, when you can hear the difference. You don't need a thermometer. You hear the difference and you can tell when you've reached setting point. The same with bread making. They made all their own bread. There is the days before supermarkets, and they were quite isolated where they were living, and they didn't just jump in the car and go shopping. So baking bread in like an old Rayburn oven, and oven bottom muffins straight out of the oven, that smell, that feel, and learning what to do and how to cool it and then to maybe freeze it down, and how to preserve, how to use a larder, a proper larder. Rice pudding with a nutmeg skin and butter. Absolutely fabulous. So everything was in use and was home produced. And to me, that was just heaven. Such very happy memories, going to the orchard or going out to the chickens and getting the eggs and coming back and just creating something and learning how to do it. That's always been my first love, food and drink, because for me, it's foundation to life. It's critical. And even now, in practice as a medical herbalist, the first thing that I'm looking at with people is their foundation, what they're eating and drinking. It's as important as the rest of the lifestyle. As Hippocrates told us, food is medicine, or it can be very toxic. It can be a big problem. So we need to know what people are doing. And to me, having your herbs is about getting it in your food as much as possible and enjoying it and understanding why it's important.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you there, actually, if you would share with us a little bit on like your tips for bringing herbs into food.
Yeah, well, I'm really keen to do that with people, and that's why I do some workshops and talks and things of that sort. When I went to Malvern, I was asked to do a demonstration, and so I chose to do a demonstration on how easy it is to produce your own hummus and how you can change it and shake it up a little bit by adding different things to a basic hummus mix, like perhaps grating some turmeric root in or putting different herbs through it. But I'm also a big fan of fermented foods, and I particularly enjoy making my own fermented cider vinegar every autumn. I'm watching the apples now with great anticipation. I'm very lucky. People even come and they bring me apples, or they let me go in a wheelbarrow and pick them up. So I'm very lucky. So I do lay a lot of things down in vinegar, and I think it's a great way of preserving herbs and actually getting the properties from the herbs through the vinegar and then using it every day. You can drink your vinegar if you wish to do, but certainly as a dressing on your veggies and your salads and everything else, or incorporating it so that it goes through your food. And the same with good extra virgin olive oil, infusing your herbs through olive oil. I mean, it's very Mediterranean, really, isn't it, I suppose, because that's what has always happened. Again, it's not something that's new, but it's a great way of bringing the health into the kitchen and enjoying the flavours and the aromas, but also that thing about observing, the colour changes that can take place. We did nasturtium flowers just the other day in fermented cider vinegar. Within 24 hours, this beautiful orange colour throughout the vinegar is just stunning. I mean, it's just, you just want to eat it. You just want to taste it and enjoy it.
Well, that must taste amazing.
Yeah,
Nasturtium flowers are extraordinary on their own, but infused in olive oil, wow.
Yeah, or in cider vinegar. You can do either or. And I think it's a great way of encouraging people to use the herbs. People say, oh, that's a culinary herb, or that's a medicinal herb, or that's a dyer's herb. Herbs cross over into so many things, don't they? But in the kitchen, they are key. It's not just a Michelin star restaurant that wants to use herbs, and edible flowers are the other thing. You know, people think it's trendy to scatter edible flowers, chicory flowers, chive flowers, calendulas, pot marigolds, you know, nasturtiums. It's not that it's trendy, it's that we've always done it. You know, we knew what we could use, and we did it. And they do say eat with your eyes. Very, very important that it looks good and tastes good. And then it'll do you good, usually.
And would you say, like, just get as many and any herbs on there as you can, or specific herbs for specific things, you know, depending on how you're feeling and what you need?
Yeah, this is about going with your intuition a lot of the time, isn't it? You know, some days it's like having a herbal brew. I mean, round my kettle, I've got 4 teapots, and it depends what I feel like. You know, it's just like, oh, I feel like this right now, or I feel like that later, or, you know, it's like somebody saying to you in the morning, what do you want for dinner tonight? Well, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel tonight. You know, there's planning involved, there's thoughts involved, but it very much depends, you know, as the day goes on, how we feel about things and what we want to have and what we want to enjoy. And I think it's the same with our drink and our food. And walk down the allotment, I could get probably 50 flowers. Dahlias now, you know, the daylilies, all the beautiful flowers that some people think are just to look ornamental in your garden. Well, they've all got properties, and they're edible, most of them. Different barks off trees, different leaves of trees, you know, all sorts of things. It's endless. I never stop being amazed and excited, and I hope that aspect of life never changes, because I think to keep the child within and enjoy and look forward to and get excited, I think is a huge, important part of life. And nature does that for me. I'm very lucky.
We're very lucky to have met you, Barbara, and you're a real crusader on ensuring that this knowledge is maintained, passed down, and kept alive.
Thank you. I think it's so vitally important, and meeting people like yourself makes you realise how our connections and how connected we are. You know, it's all about this interconnectedness, isn't it? And you build relationships, you seek out the people that you know you're going to have something in common with, and you can work together, and you can spread the word and the message much more easily when there's more of us, can't we?
I guess that's what community is all about. And it's a word that you've kept using today. It's a real theme that spreads through our podcast, because what we want to really champion is people who are really nourishing their communities in one way or another. And you're doing that in so many different ways. And you're also allowing these natural communities to kind of nourish each other and communicate with each other, educate each other too. It's through the position that you have as Trustee of the Herb Society. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, I'm really very lucky. I do connect people with other people all the time, all around the country. You know, because there's always somebody looking for something or has an idea about something. And I often think, oh, I know who could help you there. So it's lovely to put people together. It's that planting of the seed, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming and planting some seeds here. We're feeling very privileged to have you on the podcast.
Well, it's equally for me as well. I've really enjoyed it, girls. Thanks for making it very comfortable, and to talk about our favourite subject, food, herbs, nature. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Okay, so my cooking tip this month, to continue on with the herb theme, is to share a basic understanding of a Salsa Verde recipe. So Salsa Verde is really wonderful. It's a fresh, vibrant, zingy, tangy, just absolutely delicious green sauce that goes really well with pasta, with fish, with chicken, with roasted vegetables, grilled halloumi, with eggs, with pulses. It really is very versatile. The classic Salsa Verde recipe is a combination of lots of fresh parsley and fresh basil, garlic, lemon juice, capers, anchovies, extra virgin olive oil, sea salt, and black pepper. It's better hand chopped if possible, as machines tend to turn the herbs and they lose their vibrant green colour. I also like it a bit chunky and not really a very smooth sauce, so a bit more rustic. Now, you can make all kinds of variations on this. You can use herbs such as tarragon or dill, mint, coriander. You can omit the anchovies if you prefer and use green tomatillos or green tomatoes. Spice it up with green chilies or add spring onions. And once you've made it, store it in a glass jar, pour a layer of olive oil on the top, and if you're not using it immediately, pop it in the fridge where it should keep for about a week.
Wow, thanks for that, Hayley. Love a salsa verde. And one of the ingredients I want to highlight from your recipe today is parsley. I'm a massive fan of parsley. I don't think it really gets the attention that it deserves. It adds some really great flavors, but it also packs a powerful nutrient punch. So I just want to run through a few of the nutrients that parsley contains that are really useful. So it's got a fantastic amount of vitamin K in there. Vitamin K is really good for blood clotting, which is so important, for example, if you cut yourself. There's also vitamin C, which is great for wound healing and general skin health, connective tissue health. It helps you make really healthy collagen. And of course, it's important for your immune system too. There are quite a few carotenoids in there as well, including beta carotene that we use to make vitamin A from, and alpha carotene, and also lycopene. So lycopene's usually thought of as the one that helps to protect men's prostates, but it has various uses around the body. They're all antioxidants. And the carotenoids, a lot of them are really good for eye health. There's a great amount of potassium in parsley too. But what I really wanted to focus on was the luteolin. Luteolin is a plant nutrient that a lot of you might not have heard of, but it has some really impressive qualities that have been looked at in scientific studies. And one of those is around brain fog. It's antioxidant, it's also anti-inflammatory, and has shown to have anti-inflammatory activity in the brain itself, partly actually through its impact on mast cells, so reducing histamine levels in the brain. So it's really neuroprotective, so protective of brain and nerve cells, and it's been shown to actively increase memory. So a really great one there, and scientists are looking at this more and more. It's also been shown to inhibit autoimmune T cell activation, so it might be worth considering for anybody with autoimmune conditions. It also has antiviral activity, anti-cancer activity. It's a really great one. And parsley, along with a few other herbs like thyme, for example, and chamomile too, they are really fantastic sources of luteolin. And there are some other general qualities that parsley has. So one of the things that we often take parsley for, or make parsley tea for, is to help with digestion. So whether that's bloating or constipation or other digestive issues, parsley can be really helpful. It's also helpful for bladder infections, and it has this antibacterial action. And one of the things that I've often done with parsley is used it in conjunction with garlic, because it freshens the breath. So it's a really lovely one to put those two together, especially if you're going out after you eat, so you don't just think of garlic. Anyway, that's plenty on parsley. I'm sure there's loads more. If you have any favourite ways to use parsley, then do drop us a line. Thank you so much for listening today. We have several other episodes out there, and you can subscribe so that you get notifications for new episodes coming up. So please do subscribe. Please do share with everybody you know, and please do send us your feedback. We would really love to hear from you.
So if you enjoyed that, please subscribe to our North and Chick podcast, and also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as North and Chick, all lowercase, no spaces.